What is up, everybody? You're watching Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker, where the answers comes first, the reasons come last, but we're constantly and always still learning. So this past week has been very exciting because Panasonic has finally released the full specifications of their new full-frame digital mirrorless cameras. So they've released the S1, which is a hybrid version for photographers and videographers, and then you have the S1R, which is more geared towards photographers. Now, in the very first video that I talked about when they announced they were doing a full-frame video camera, I talked about that a video version is most likely coming. And I also gave some ideas of what could show up in the video version. Well, here's the fun thing, is one of those things that I talked about actually did show up in one of these two cameras. So now I have no doubt that a video camera or a video-centric version is coming. Now, all the things that I'm going to be talking about here is strictly for narrative filmmakers and maybe event videographers. I am not going to be talking about this in the fact of if you're a photographer or what have you. I am strictly going to be talking about the video versions. So without further ado, here are 3 features that they've actually released that I believe is going to show up in the video version, and 3 theoretical things that could potentially show up. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the one major feature that I actually theorized could happen in a video version actually did show up, and this is the multi-crop of the sensor. So you can shoot video in full frame mode, Super 35 mode, and Micro Four Thirds mode, effectively allowing you to basically shoot an entire movie with one single lens. Now, Panasonic didn't actually announce this. It was actually found through the menus from the guys at DP Review. And basically, you have this feature, but it's only in the S1R version and it's not in the S1. That is where Panasonic is getting you and basically telegraphing that it's going to show up in a video version. Because what happens is if you shoot in full frame mode in the S1R, it's actually going to do pixel binning and not actually give you a true full sensor readout, which makes sense because the sensor has so many megapixels. But with the S1 having less megapixels and able to give you a full sensor readout in 4K, the fact that that feature is missing in the S1 version, again, makes me believe that the video version is going to have it. So I'm super excited that this feature did show up. So hopefully it is in the video version, and let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is the paid upgrades. Now, the paid upgrade seems to only be geared towards the S1 and not so much the S1R, because again, they're really trying to make sure that the S1R just has basic video functions and they're not going to try to improve on it. So the paid upgrades are Vlog, which I believe is actually going to be the full version of Vlog and not Vlog L. And then the ability to shoot 422 10-bit internally at 30p and 24p. And then of course the 60p, but it has to be done through the HDMI. So the fact that they've also talked about a paid upgrade for the S1 line further makes me believe that this theoretical video version is just going to have it already. They kind of did this with the GH5S where it already had Vlog already inside and you didn't have to pay for it. And again, this is something that they talked about. They said that Vlog is not for everybody and we want to make sure people get the choice of whether or not they want to have Vlog or not. So they're still doing this, and they're doing this with the S1 line, which again further makes sense that a video version is coming and those features are going to be included. Now, this third and final reason before we jump into theoretical land was actually again found out by Jordan and Chris at DP Review. And they talked about how the S1 is curiously missing the Vectorscope and the Waveform, which was in the GH5. So I believe this is Panasonic basically drawing very hard lines in the sand and say, no, that's a feature you do not need as a hybrid shooter. But if you're a very serious video shooter, then yes, you're gonna need it. So I'm gonna guess again that this is gonna show up in the video version, and maybe they're even gonna add false color to the mix, which would be awesome. All right, so now we're going to move into theoretical land, and basically, again, these are all based off of the information that has been released by Panasonic ambassadors and a couple rumors that surfaced up with people at the conference. So again, these are not set in stone. These are just things that I'm thinking of and that it could potentially show up in the video version. So the first one is we're going to talk about higher ISO. There could be a chance that the video version is going to have an even higher ISO performance that's going to be clean. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because, again, the GH5 and the GH5S, the S is supposedly the one that's more geared towards video filmmakers, so higher ISO was something that they wanted to tackle. So I kind of believe that this could be a thing, but here's the thing though. According to Griffin Hammond's high ISO test that he released a couple days ago, the S1 worked pretty darn well up to 25,600 ISO, which is what Griffin said he was comfortable shooting at if he really wanted to push it. So that being said, I think in terms of this video version, maybe they'll give us one more extra stop up to 51,000 ISO, maybe even 2 stops. I don't think they will, but maybe just one more stop. And again, as a narrative filmmaker, I don't believe that you should be shooting at these high ISOs all the time, because you do need to learn how to light your scenes. Only very rarely in certain circumstances would I actually deploy such a high ISO. Now, if you're an event videographer for weddings and such, this could be awesome for you because, again, let's say you do get booked for a gig and they say, no, you cannot, I repeat, you cannot add your own lights because you're gonna ruin the whole reception, what have you. So in these cases, being able to shoot at such a high ISO, which that's clean, that's going to be awesome for you. Now, this is where I'm going to go into a tangent here because it actually snowballs into a whole bunch of other things. So, that being said, if you're an event videographer and Panasonic, for whatever reason, decide that the video version needs to not have IBIS in it, that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people yet again, because when they released the GH5S, they talked about one thing, was that the IBIS, the way it was designed in the GH5, in certain rigging situations, it actually could not hold the sensor still. I get it. In those very certain situations, I get it. But again, they have to remember the market here is that a lot of independent filmmakers are going to be using this that don't have the crazy budgets to rig up everything. So if they take it away, that's going to be one thing that's going to irk me, and I'm going to basically say, no, I probably won't go to that video version, I don't think. But here's the other thing though. I do recall that they might have said something about, because of how the processor is working extra hard to take all that sensor data and have such a clean high ISO in the GH5S, that overheating could potentially have been an issue. And that was another reason why they didn't have it in the GH5S. Now, that might be valid back then, but the new bodies are significantly bigger. But here's the other thing. This is the first time Panasonic has ever admitted that their cameras could potentially overheat, especially if they're shooting 4K at 60p in the S1 and the S1R. This is the first time they've admitted to such a fact. So, that being said, they've capped recording limits when you're at 4K 60. I don't think it's going to necessarily overheat when you're at 4K 30 or 24p. So that being said, I'm really hoping that the reason we haven't seen the video version crop up is because they're trying to figure out a way to make sure that IBIS could be in it. Because again, if they take it out, it would definitely put a huge damper for me in terms of what I want to do with the video camera. So that is a pretty huge tangent based on just high ISO. But anyways, let's move on to number 2. Now, number 2, again, is just my theory. And I would think that the video version would not have a dual card slot that's different. So the S1 and the S1R has, the SD and the QXD. Now, I'm thinking that maybe the video version will have 2 of the same card slots, whether it be dual SD or dual QXD. And the reason I'm saying this is because it kind of it kind of irked me a little bit that there were two different card slots, because I would rather just have the same one, whether it be SD or XQD. Now, this could potentially happen because of reason 3, but it also might not happen, because I would have assumed that if that was the case, that the S1R would have this same card slots as well, but they don't. So again, I'm not really sure. So let's move on to number 3 of why they could potentially want to have 2 of the same card slots. All right, so number 3 is this, and again, this is a huge rumor that was showing up, and that Panasonic could potentially allow ProRes RAW to come out of the HDMI output. Now, I don't know if they said that that could be a thing for the S1 or the S1R, but that was a rumor that did surface, because I think the Nikon allows you to do the ProRes RAW, and the Ava now has ProRes RAW as well, I think through the HDMI output, I can't remember. But again, here's the thing. If this rumor is true, there could be a chance that the video version would either allow it to happen internally, which would be awesome. If that was the case, then I'm guessing they're probably gonna make it an QXD dual card slot. But here's the other thing though. With Panasonic saying really early on that they were gonna give you the best video codec possible in these cameras, well, lacklusterly to say that these cameras, most of them is just 8-bit, and yes, you can go to 10-bit, but the 10-bit I believe only uses the HEVC, the new standard, the H.265 instead of H.264, which yes, is a better and more efficient codec and allows you to have smaller file sizes. So, assuming ProRes RAW still has to be done through HDMI output, what's not to say that the video version is going to give you a really high bit rate H.265, something that's insanely crisp. So if that is the case, then maybe the video version will have different codecs that the S1 does not have. And if this is a case, I could see Panasonic essentially saying, oh, but if you want those codecs, you can pay us some more money for it. So again, I really think that with the S1 line, or the S line in general, they are literally trying to divide everybody, whether you're a hybrid shooter, strictly a video shooter, or strictly a photographer. I think these are things that they're trying to experiment with this first generation, and that they're really going to try to push the envelope with this one. So what's the bottom line here? The bottom line is, at this very moment, Panasonic has given me enough reason to not doubt that a video version is coming, and therefore I won't be pre-ordering the S1. Even though the S1 does have a lot of features that I do like for its price point, essentially the way I'm looking at it, it's basically a full-frame version of the GH5S at almost the same price, but I'm not gonna get into that with this video. I'm gonna talk about that next week in another video of why I would actually pre-order the S1 for my video needs. But for right now, with the whole fact of there is the multi-crop sensor shooting modes in the S1R, the fact that there is this whole paid upgrade thing where you can get internal 4K 10-bit at 30 and 24p and 60p through the HDMI out, the V-Log, the fact that it's missing key tool sets like the Vectorscopes and the Waveform and potentially a false color. These 3 things being in the video version makes total sense, because again, with that being it, I really believe they're trying to market the S1S, I guess. I don't really know what they're going to call this video version, but for the sake of argument, the S1S. I think they're going to place it as the true little brother to the Ava line, and then eventually the GH5S or the GH6S, what have you, that's going to be an even littler brother to this whole lineup of video-centric cameras for filmmakers. So when you think of it in those terms, that is pretty enticing, because at this point in time, you have the Ava, which I think is what, $6,500. They just came out with the firmware not too long ago, but it's up there. It's that weird middle category between $5,000 to $10,000. And then you have this video version, which I'm going to theoretically guess it's at $3,000. So I'm hoping that's the case, because if it's any more than that, it could make people wonder. And then you have the GH line, which is going to get down to in the $2,000 range, I hope. And therefore you have basically a camera for almost every price range, which is awesome for a filmmaker. Now, another reason why I believe that Panasonic hasn't outright told us that a video version is coming, even though I'm pretty sure all of us think that there is going to be one, I'm not the only one, is that Sony has not released anything about their A7S III. We all know it's coming, we don't know when it's coming, but I think Panasonic has strategically placed themselves in a way where they can continue developing what they know is going to be a downfall, like the fact that 4K 60p could overheat the sensor and all that other stuff. But they're placing themselves in a way so that Sony has to announce it, then they know what they can counter with to make people want to go over to them. And again, this has been the same forever. It's always this cat and mouse chase where they're gonna one up each other with the next generation of cameras. But at this moment in time, the fact that Panasonic has excluded those three features that I talked about, and they kind of cherry picked which camera would have what. This definitely makes me believe that a video one is coming. I don't know when. It'd be awesome if it was sooner than later, but chances are it's going to be after the announcement of the Sony A7S III, sorry. And hey, that is it for this week, everybody. If you have any questions or comments or want to discuss this topic further, go ahead and comment down below. I will get to them as fast as I can. And until then, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week.